Welcome back to another show, another episode of Beyond Tomorrow, another chapter in a phenomenal book. And hey, by the way, 3 days, you don't know this because I'm supposed to be leaving Friday. That's what you know. I've actually brought our trip
closer.
Yeah, to Wednesday. So I'm like 2 days away from starting our road trip.
Wednesday?
No, Thursday. Sorry. Yeah, Thursday.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, that must be nice.
It is going to be nice. Yeah, so by the way, since we're on here, thanks for filling the gap so I can go on a road trip. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no anxiety at all. No anxiety at all.
No,
but it should be fun. It should be a good
what's
trip
awesome is actually nobody else knows either, at the office. So God, I love having an incredible team. You guys are amazing. Yeah, so we're headed, we're actually, and you know this, we're headed out west.
Yes.
My theory is we got to do it this year because with Drew getting older, and I think back at going, right out of high school, being a young man, and I'm thinking, okay, if my parents invite me on a vacation, what's the type of vacation I would go on? Mm-hmm. Probably a road trip, 2 weeks in a car with my siblings.
Probably not.
Probably not going to do it, no. So I'm like, I got to do it now. We can force them to go. So I'm thinking now's the time, and so we're going to do this road trip I've been wanting to do, honestly, for quite some time. So up to South Dakota.
How much input had the kids had on the destinations or places to go?
Well, none.
Yeah.
I mean, once they've kind of known the location or whatever, they've thrown out some different ideas like getting side by sides for a day. Jake wants to go to a rodeo in Jackson Hole, which we're gonna go. But yeah, so we're headed not straight north, but we're going north to South Dakota. We're gonna see Mount Rushmore, Custer State Park, stay there for 3 days, jump over to Bozeman, Montana, hit some trout fishing. I'm super stoked about that. Do the north loop of Yellowstone, and then 3 days down into Jackson Hole, and then down through Colorado. Spend 4 or 5 days with some family there, so do some more trout fishing. Not too bad.
That's a good trip.
Yeah,
that's a good trip. You get to do a lot, see a lot. Obviously, wrap it up with seeing some family, and like you said, you don't get that much opportunity as kids are just growing and going by so fast. Time gets filled with so many different sports activities, school, work, and everything of that sort. To take 2 weeks off and just spend quality time and just go.
Yeah.
I mean,
it doesn't come often, and it's like, do it while you can. We all know, like, at the end of the day, time goes by so fast. So, like, these memories are monumental. I can remember doing the road trip way back in the day in the station wagon, which was, across the country. Mm-hmm. Just Dad would, we'd go out there to see family. So I'm super excited, man. And I think it's also a benefit of having a family with 3 boys. Because, my boys are not into the whole go spend a week at the beach. Now, my poor wife, I know. I got to give her loads of grace because she's incredible. But the truth is we just don't, our boys don't want to go sit at the beach for 5-6 days.
5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got one more.
Which privately helps me out because I don't want to either.
Well, Grayson's graduating next year, so this would be if I take that same approach, this would be probably next summer. Next summer would be the last summer, before he's off to college, where he's going to want to spend time with his friends and his crew for spring break or for the summers, and those type of trips that are going to be designed for him are going to be completely different than what we would do with like Liv, who's 13, who's 14 now.
Yeah,
so
you got to.
We might have a road trip ahead of us next year.
You do it next year. Yeah, go knock it out, man. Yeah. Places you've never seen. Or at least for me, I've never been to that part of the country. So, to be able to go out there and knock it out, there's a great, I use, there's an app called Road Trippers. I know I've showed you before, but for those listening, if you're ever planning a road trip, that's a pretty cool application. You can just map everything out. It gives you a lot of places to consider stopping, like attractions that otherwise you'd never look up. You just don't know to look it up, but maybe on your route or whatever. So yeah, man, I'm excited, and we're going to continue the show
on the road
while I'm at some of these destinations, which is also going to be incredibly fun. So with that said,
don't
man.
pick a boring backdrop. If you're going to be Mount Rushmore, you're going to be Jackson Hole, you're going to go to those different places, make sure the backdrop of where you are.
I'm thinking like Richie Rich, like I somehow get up in that thing, like the nose or the cavity or sitting in the middle of like the valley. You know what I mean? Like Yellowstone.
Yeah, let's give the audience good visuals.
People drive by and they're like, what is that guy doing? Why is he out there with the buffaloes? Like, that's me.
That's you.
Beyond tomorrow. Anyway, man, we've been working through this book, and we were supposed to cover chapter 2 and 3 today. There was a lot in chapter 2, okay? Which is my way of justifying that I just hadn't made it through chapter 3 yet. But there's a lot in chapter 2, so we're going to stick with that for today. And but it's been if for all of those that have kind of stuck with us over the last few weeks on the podcast and the YouTube channel and all that stuff, listening as we break down this book, it's been a lot of incredible content, alarming content, truth be told, and really kind of a quest for change, like, hey, you got a lot of this information. Now, what are you going to do about it? And just, I feel honestly empowered as a father, leading what will be 3, grown men, fathering them. I feel like, hey, Andrew, you got to get your act together, put in steps, put in boundaries, guardrails, and ensure that they are in the right place, absorbing the right content, and filtering out some of the things that just don't need to be there based off a lot of the stats and the information we've already covered.
Right, yeah. And information that we already, in some aspects, might have known already. Yeah. That there was and there is a direct link between time, usage, what they're actually seeing on social media. And I think we all knew that there's a disconnect there. But really coming down to the foundation of what really is the core root, why, how it is really impacting our kids. This book so far has, put a lot of evidence behind what we're seeing and put a lot of stats and statistics behind it. And, the first chapter was the surge of suffering, right? And it really just kind of really put the foundation on what this book is all about. Is that there's been this great rewiring of childhood. And a lot of this rewiring really happened in the crossroads of the rise of technology, the rise of internet, and this use of smartphones to really change the formation of what a childhood looks like and how that is really impacting Gen Z nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, completely rewired the way that children have been raised forever, in regards to technology, because, like you said, the author writing this book, Jonathan Haidt, he literally was not even on a mission to write this book. He was writing a different book. In chapter 1 of the book that he was under contract to write, he was covering this concept of, the health of our adolescents as they transition their life to the virtual world. And he runs across the data that you're talking about. He runs across the massive increase, 167% increase in suicide rates and self-harm and, emergency room visits and anxiety, depression. It's insane. And he basically runs across this information and is like, hey, I got to do something with this. So maybe the book I'm going to write has to take a pause. There's something else here. And he just starts digging like you said. He faces the obstacles of, okay, is all of this data pointing to a specific age group? Is it pointing to a specific gender, geographical location, or different country? Or, and he settles in that, hey, this is pretty relevant across the board or the globe,
right?
Specifically this year and this season, specifically for our adolescent youth.
Yeah, he's pinpointed around 2010. Anyone born from 2010 on as this. 1995. And 2010 was this emergence of this connectivity between internet and social media and technology, and really that has really, like you just mentioned, has this major impact psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically on kids. You know, he said this is the first generation that has grown through puberty in this technological world, in this social media digital age. And it's really having a big impact on kids, to the point where even, you know, as recently as yesterday, I read an article that the Surgeon General wants to slap warning stickers or warning labels on social media, because he's saying that there is a mental health crisis going on, and the two are connected, between mental health, especially childhood mental health, and social media.
And I think you and I would probably even go beyond what Jonathan Haidt references in this book to say, okay, is there a mental crisis? You know, are our youth and even young adults struggling with, you know, mental illnesses that historically we just haven't seen? The answer is yes. Is it all responsible? Is all the responsibility falling back to a social media platform or a piece of technology? The answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no. There's more to that story. One of them also could be contributed to, you know, two parents in a house.
Right.
You know, mother, father, sticking together, grinding it out, just like the old days, raising their kids in a home and an environment where they can watch and see and mimic what really is true and what should be true about a relationship. You know, so you now look at the massive increase of single households and women that are stuck raising children on their own, you know, men that are exiting the family.
Yeah, which is a huge impact.
So no doubt it's not all the fault of technology.
Right.
You know, I would say it's the shortcoming or the shortfall, if you will, of lack of parenting and lack of devotion and lack of purpose behind parenting.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna.
Which, you know, we're all victims. I mean, we're not victims. We're all. I'm right there with them. You know, I look back and I say, hey, I got almost a 16-year-old son. Mm-hmm. You know, I haven't. It's not like I've been always, you know, purpose driven in raising my boys. You know, I look back and think, hey, you've missed it here. You know, but it's just like I literally had a conversation with Ben this week. Ben, my middle son. The one person you can't lie to, you can try to lie to a lot of people. And you can try to hide things, but don't you ever try to deceive yourself. You got to learn how to be honest with yourself. And when you look at yourself in the mirror, you know if you're doing the right thing or if you're not doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to do that. So, you know, for me, I look back and I say, hey, you know, Andrew, there's moments and seasons that you look back on, you're like, missed it. I missed it. Yeah. You know, should have been more protective, should have been more on top, should have been more driven, should have, you know, had them in the Word with me, reading and working through things. So, but the point is, it ain't too late.
No, it's never too late. It's never too late. And, you know, unfortunately, parenting doesn't come with a manual or a how-to book that can hit every single aspect, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this topic in itself is still, people are still researching this, right? I mean, I think there are some who feel like there isn't any danger to social media and kids, right? This isn't, I think this isn't a proven quote unquote fact, right? That everyone agrees on, and especially probably those who created these platforms,
right?
Will disagree or maybe throw on free speech as a reason why there shouldn't be any type of laws or bills passed to kind of curb the impact or the influence or the usage rate on kids nowadays. But you're right. I mean, it's not too late. I mean, that's why we're making this series, because if it were too late, then we're doomed. If it was too late, right? Because if this is what's happening to this generation now, imagine what the next generation is going to go through.
Yeah.
But all we can do from, you know, quote unquote mistakes that we have is learn from them. Mm-hmm. And realize what we can do to basically to steer the ship in the right way.
Yeah, and then put in action steps. You know, and literally just you just got to make a change. You know, which is, I think, the initiative. It doesn't matter if if you're listening and you are a grandmother, grandfather, if you are, you know, a young adult or early in your marriage and you haven't had children yet, like at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to lead the next generation. Mm-hmm. We do. And you know, to me, that call is even great the older you get. You know, you go through, what was gosh darn it, the book that you and I read, Not Good to Great. Was it Good to Great? We did a few years ago. Oh, shoot.
What's it on? I'll tell you.
They started out the book with the story about the plane. The author of the book.
Oh, my gosh.
In the plane, here's this conversation, and then he talks about the two waves of life.
I know exactly what
and transitioning from the initial season of your life, which is like, you know, earnings and, you know, growing and developing and innovative and all this stuff, into this transition over to basically giving back, you know, and the responsibility of that next generation. So I get off on a tangent here, but the point is it doesn't matter your season of life. We all have a great responsibility. We have a great responsibility to share. Now, what we share should be truth, and and that could be up for question maybe for some, which would be open for a conversation. But we have a responsibility to teach, you know, and to educate, and then also to lead, you know, to lead well. So,
yeah, I mean, if again, don't want to go too much on a tangent, but nice shout out to Cross Point City Church, because we attended. I know you and I attended.
You still got it in the pack.
I still got it in the pack. I don't want to lose it.
Oh, man.
I don't want to lose it. But yeah, we attended an Act Like Men conference with Cross Point City Church. And going back to I feel there's a lack of male leadership, a void in families, which could cause one of the reasons why there is this lack of direction in families nowadays. Men are supposed to be leaders, protectors, providers, and lovers. Right?
Act like men.
Act like men. And so you're right. We need to be very diligent and intentional about what the legacy we're leaving with our kids.
100%.
All parents need to be. And chapter 2 kind of talks about really what childhood should, quote unquote, should look like. You know, what do children need as they're developing in these impressionable ages, as I would say.
Can I say something about that?
What?
I got to. So, by the way, you're right. Cross Point, incredible weekend. We had that men's conference, and Cartersville's doing things, you know? And I'm not saying any other community's not, but to watch and to be there and to be present, 900 men in a room, like excited about leading their family and their community and their careers and whatever, you know, capacity they can lead. I mean, it was pretty incredible. Talking about youth, though, I'm going through like an internal battle right now, not with my child, but with those that are in a position to lead my child in the public school system, and feel like they have a right to say and to do some of the things that they've done. And I was frustrated, angry, and I had that in my pocket. And I told Amy, I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to have to put God in the car and leave the coin there for a bit, because I'm going to have to take care of business where he don't need to be. You know, I was just joking. Obviously, I get the point, but I was like, I'm going to have to put the coin out. I don't need the reference.
Is always offered to you.
Yeah. I'm going to get that forgiveness later. Oh, anyway, what children need to do in childhood, okay? Yes. But it all plays the same point, okay? Let's just lay the landscape here for a second, because Mo, part of my frustration is this: what children need to do in childhood. And when you look at the demands on our youth, not just from social media, not just the dedication that kids spend, but the demands that we put on our kids, that the school system puts on the children, that the coaches and the athletic departments put on these kids, it is not to mention the pressure they put on themselves.
Right.
They can't be kids.
They can't.
You know, and I'm not saying responsibility doesn't need to become more prevalent and relevant the older they get, so that they are ready to become men and they're ready to step into the world. I'm just saying, hey, not every child's going to play in the MLB. You know, not every child's going to go to the NFL. right?
Yeah,
so like,
right.
chill out. Okay.
Yeah.
I get competing. I understand that the value that can be taught in grinding. I get the 2-a-day practices. I get all that, right? But sometimes we make statements and we dehumanize our kids because we expect them to be something that, let's just be honest, no one expected us to be. You know, I wasn't going to the NFL. I wasn't going to go play in the NBA. Thank God my dad didn't have that expectation on me. You know, I was able to enjoy playing basketball.
Right.
Still competed, still learned all the same valuable lessons, still grinded it out, right? But I didn't have that mandate. You know what I mean? Kids got to be kids.
Yeah, they've got to be kids, and you know, the really kind of what the definition of childhood is supposed to look like, you know. And I would say my childhood was filled with a lot of playtime, right? A lot of playing outdoors, outside with friends, whether it was football, baseball, riding the bikes. You know, we did. My mother doesn't know this, but you know, living in New York City, there's apartment complexes are basically side by side. So we would go on roofs and jump from building to building. And you know, if my mother knew that, she would freak out. But I remember almost falling off a building.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic, right? Because we were jumping. Again, they're all connected, but at some point they stop for a street, and then the buildings continue. Well, I was just jumping, and not really paying attention. And then something God probably, most likely, told me to stop and look. And that was the end of the building because we were getting ready to
go again, just keep going.
And keep going, right? Whew. So, but anyway, all that being said is, childhood was just based off of play. And nowadays, and if you're reading along with us, you see that there's been a shift of what childhood play looks like. And Jonathan makes a good point about what a play-based versus a phone-based society looks like, or phone-based play-based or phone-based childhood looks like. Mm-hmm. And play-based, he really, really harps on the idea of it being unsupervised, without adult supervision there. Again, the experience of me jumping roof to roof. There clearly weren't any parents there, but the reason why I think unsupervised is very key is because that's where you're learning, mm-hmm. right? That's where you're learning to succeed, where you're learning to fail, and you're learning to be part of a group, right? Without having the parents being involved too much.
So much learning that we really don't even know
it's happening.
I mean, right. It's happening.
But you don't know it's happening.
You don't know it's happening.
Right.
Right. There's so many little things that you don't even contribute probably back to those early days of your childhood, but yet they were monumental into you becoming who you are today. The three questions, to your point, that he starts this chapter out with, we're on page 50 right here. Okay, so he basically poses three questions that he works through in the rest of chapter 2, and here they are. What happens to child and adolescent development when daily life gets radically rewired in this way? And radically rewired, to your concept, is swapping from this play-based childhood to the phone-based childhood. Second question, might the new phone-based childhood alter the complex interplay of biological, psychological, and cultural development? And then lastly, might it block kids from doing some of the things they need to do in order to turn into healthy, happy, competent, and successful adults? Let's talk about this slow growth childhood and why it's necessary ultimately for our development and for not ours, but for sure our kids, right. And really as humans. Why is it necessary to have a slow growth development?
Because that's where you learn, right? That's where a lot of if you think our brains really are at 90% of its development by the time we're 5 years old, right? So his timeline of slow growth is from birth to 2, you're just growing fast, and then really from 3 to 12, 13, that's that slow growth phase, and then 13 puberty on.
Sometimes I want to ask my kid, "Did your brain stop growing at 5?" I'm just playing. Oh man.
But during that slow growth phase, he talks about that's where a lot of the impressionable years, your learning years, where you are really just you're exploring this new world that's in front of you, right? I mean, if you just think about physically at 2 years old, you're no longer crawling, you're walking. You've really now developed or developing into this. Those first 2 years, you're almost like useless, right? I mean, you're still so reliant and dependent on your parents for
which don't feel bad. You're
around.
Incredibly useful
right.
to Amy, because she's like the baby queen and thief.
But during that developing years, there's so much learning that's going on in that 3 to 12, 3 to 13 years.
So like you're right, because like when you think about we are so slow.
Right.
Compared to animals. So like you look at like a horse. Now I'm speaking way out of my league here, but I think like you envision a horse being born, that sucker's like walking in a day. You know what I mean? Like moving around, where we can't do nothing.
Right.
Forever, it seems, years. And so you're right, we're so slow, but yet at the end of the day, it's so much more complex in our anatomy in comparison to these other, animals in my example. And so you're right. Like we go through, but to your point, do we go through it for a reason? And are we going through this slow-based development, fast, then slow, and then fast again when we hit those pubertic. Oh my gosh. Help me out, Mo.
Pubescent?
Thank you. Pubescent years. That's why you're like the greatest partner ever. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's necessary, and it's necessary because my Lord, we have to learn. And you and I were having this conversation literally right before we started the show about part of this latter season of development when we get fast again, going through the pubescent years, is in some sense a cultural apprenticeship, where we are, going through and not physically growing. Okay, we may have already hit that, but our brains are now dumping that which is unnecessary, uploading the things that are necessary, new connections being made. We're watching, we're comprehending, we're perceiving, we're defining that which is true, hopefully not on our own. We have a basis for that, but we're going through that part of the developmental stage at that season of life. And the whole cultural apprenticeship is like, hey, we're kind of consciously aware of society, and we're starting to build, what is our worldview? What is our political stance? What is our, it's important years.
Right. Yeah, and those years, kids are watching, kids are being influenced. And so, the cultural apprenticeship, he talks about the idea of, let me make sure I get this right, social learning, right? Yeah. And, we're jumping a little bit further, but, during the social learn, so the 3 motivations, first of all, the three things he believes that children should have, in as far as childhood is concerned, is free play, attunement, and social learning. Mm-hmm. And when social learning, that's more of like society. You're learning from the society and the culture in front of you. And so that's where the ideas or the topics of, well, shouldn't you be the role model for your children? Because they're going to try to find and emulate something, right? They're trying to find examples of what should I be? Who should I be? What should I be doing? And so hopefully you are that first person they point to or look at as, okay, this is the right direction I should be going. Mm-hmm. But they're going to take those cues from society. And so that's where, if they're in the wrong environment, then they're going to find those cues and they're going to find the wrong cues and try to emulate those
and by environment, it's not just a reference to like physical environment, which is like community, school system, although very influential. It's the social environment, which is what are they seeing, what is being downloaded to them,
right?
And part of this whole cultural apprenticeship is, the idea is that it aligns with our development physically so that it all happens at the appropriate time. The problem with social media in the hands of an adolescent is that it forces that development too soon.
Right.
It's a flood of data and unfortunately a bias based off of a lot of different factors, predominantly factors that are a part of an algorithm created by developers that influence directions that maybe you would rather not your child go. And so the problem is we are supposed to naturally, I think what he's saying here, and we're going to get into the whole free play as the first part, but he's saying, listen, as children, we have always went through this developmental stage, fast, slow, and fast again. And when we go through that second season, it's normal and it should happen in line with our physical body, our physical development. But when we do it too soon, when we gain the knowledge and we get the influence ahead of our physical development, then is it problematic and is it a challenge? Mm-hmm. And I think you posed a question. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
I think it was a good conversation. You posed a question to me, but do we think that the pace that we have set as a society, and societies are different here in America in comparison to, and even different in locations of America.
Right.
But is the natural development of a child as a response to our society the right pace? Or have we accommodated a longer trend of becoming an adult here in the U.S. in comparison to other countries? And is that the right decision?
Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't know which is right.
Yeah, right.
I don't know which is right. I personally think that we have, at least from my generation, and again, I'm 43 years old, to now, I think we have tried to slow that developmental down a little bit.
Yeah. For what reason?
For what reason? I don't know. You know, I hear the term, let the kids be kids, mm-hmm. and again, I'm not saying that kids can't be kids and kids shouldn't be kids, because the whole point of the first half of this conversation today is that let kids play, mm-hmm. right? But I think as we mature in age, there are some responsibilities that kids need to have, mm-hmm. and that those responsibilities do lead them to hopefully become great adults, right? So the idea, like, I remember having my first job at like 13 years old, and I was a summer camp counselor for like Jake's age, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, right? So what my responsibility was to play basketball with them, right? To make sure no one.
But still a responsibility.
A responsibility, right? And I looked forward to that. I looked forward to that summer, knowing that'll be my first job. Now it's like, you don't want your child working until like 15, 16, 17. I think you miss out on that responsibility of a paycheck, of getting up on time, of responsibilities that, hey, these 6 kids are your kids. You got to mm-hmm. make sure that they're playing, they're having fun, they're not running around stabbing each other with a pair of scissors. So I think now we are slowly pushing that and delaying those type of responsibilities on kids.
I would agree, and I think too. Once again, it's just an opinion, but the more I think about it, we are basically slowing down, in some sense, the responsibilities for our youth. We're telling them, either by our actions or statements or just the system, that the process is go to college, but really you should have a career, but really you should have cash on hand, but really you should have a down payment and a good paying job and your bills in order and your debt paid off before you become responsible, have a family, have children, etc. We're sending this message, like you're saying, delay, delay, delay. Mm-hmm. But then we're giving them a resource prior to when they should have it, 10, 11, 12, that allows them to absorb and build concrete thoughts, opinions about vital areas of life, including worldview, political perspective, social belief, before they're responsible. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah, so it's like we delay this side of it, and we say, oh, play baseball forever, well into your college years, and then swap over to softball, and then get married later on. That's funny. I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, and then
that sounded personal.
Yeah, right. And then we give them the tools to make decisions on their belief system, and it's like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. So he talks about free play. All right, kids need free play.
Yeah.
And let's just
and he defines free play as activity that is freely chosen and directed by the participants and undertaken for its own sake, not consciously pursued to achieve ends that are distinct from the activity itself.
Mm-hmm. Which he comes back to later, but for the sake of time too, I think we move through this. What he's saying is hey, when you're playing a pickup basketball game, you're playing tag. It's just tag,
right?
When you're playing wiffle ball in the backyard with some buddies at 7, 8 years old, it's just wiffle ball.
It is.
Yeah, but these kids now, when they're doing something predominantly in the social world, they're having to think well beyond
just that post itself.
Correct.
They're thinking about, is it worded properly? What kind of likes I'm going to get? What kind of comments I'm going to get? What followers I'm going to get? Am I going to get followers? It goes way beyond just the posting of itself.
Mm-hmm. Instead of just allowing them to be kids, which is what's necessary in this free play scenario. Kids develop. As they develop, they're constantly chasing and go. I think about like a toddler as an example. A toddler, their first goal is to, obviously roll over, right? Then they get on their belly, then they want to crawl. And then when they crawl, they want to pull themselves up. And when they pull themselves up, they want to walk. And when they walk, they want to climb. And when they climb, they want to jump, and they're just constantly advancing. Okay.
They're
curious, right? And they're advancing. We talked last week in a way that increases the fear, of the chase of fear, if you will, to risk more and to understand risk at a young age. I mean, literally toddlers, right? And then they get into this stage where it's necessary for them to deal with, hey, I got in a scuffle at the park, I'm dealing with a challenge here. I got into a scuffle with a good friend of mine. Now I need to apologize, or do I need to apologize, or how do I handle it? And, all these things are appropriate, and they have been forever in this free play world.
Yeah. You're getting the conflict resolution. You're getting an interpersonal management, interpersonal skills, and you learn that over time, right? You're learning that over time, and you lose those type of experiences when you're spending hours and hours and hours in front of a screen.
Yeah,
and he even mentions that the tablets and smartphones themselves are quote unquote experience blockers, because it's blocking you from those type of experiences that you can't find on a screen or in a screen itself.
He says it's not homework that gets them ready, nor is it classes on handling their emotions. Such adult-led lessons may provide useful information, but information doesn't do much to shape or develop the brain. Play does. Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
Experience, not information, is the key to emotional development.
True.
And I would challenge you right now. Can you think of any scenario where you in a classroom setting, elementary, middle, high, or college, listening to a professor and learned something valuable about how to handle an emotional response or an emotional challenging moment? Or when you think back, can you think of scenarios with some buddies or challenges, outside of school when it was monumental?
Right.
It's crazy. He's right.
And with free play, another thing about free play is that mistakes are not as costly. Right. So if you go back to that experience, if you just go back to what you just mentioned before, right? Yeah, you have a scuffle with a buddy, you say the wrong thing, right? Most of the times let's resolve this conflict, right? It may be a week, but it's not, but you're resolving it, right? Because the mistakes aren't huge. But on social media, you make the wrong, you put the quote unquote wrong post, right? You say the wrong thing, you like the wrong picture. Mm-hmm. It could be detrimental. You could lose your job. You may not get hired. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many
crazy.
Recruiters are saying that they're looking at posts from before they hire you? They're looking at your social media presence.
Yeah.
What are you saying? What are you liking? What are you tagging? Mm-hmm. People are getting quote unquote canceled, right? Because they say the wrong thing. So like social media, the mistakes are costly.
Yeah.
Where in this free play world, it's not as costly.
It's not as costly. And there's just so much like intrinsic value that comes from being the kid that's trying to be picked out of the group of kids to play on the team. Or, you think about those moments, and we try to protect our kids from them, but there's just so much, like they literally internally, intrinsically know what they need to acquire to not be that kid next time. Mm-hmm. Those are such valuable lessons. Hey, if I want to be the first kid chosen, I need to try to acquire these skills. Right. And if I just don't have the ability to acquire these skills, maybe I need to do something different. And just all these, like at a young age, you look back and you're like, it just, you don't notice it or acknowledge it maybe or give it credit, but there's a lot of life taught and learned.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In those free play years. Crazy.
I agree. Attunement is next.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially at the end of the day, being able to be present and understanding and being aware and responding to I'd say the emotional needs, or just just being able to respond and be aware of your children in general. Mm-hmm. That's what attunement means. The kids want that connection. They want to be in tune with other people,
which is
especially their parents.
Yeah, and that is also like infant age. You know what I mean? So like you have a newborn or even a few months old, right? And you're laughing, trying to get a response out of your baby, and the baby tries to mimic back what you're doing to the baby. Then they get a little bit older and you're like clapping or whatever my wife does. I'm like, when she does this, I'm like, yeah, I want some too. Give me some food. I'm like, I know what that means. Bring dad some food too. Oh man. But they, they're wanting to mimic that. And then he gives an example of like, schoolgirls that are, jump roping or doing the
hands.
The hands thing. And it's like there's no real purpose to it. There's no end to it if you keep getting it right. There's no, but it's just that they're in tune, to your point. Mm-hmm. And once again, that's how we're supposed to develop. That play-based childhood gives us that opportunity to be social with people, to be in tune, and to mimic responses that we want to acquire. Mimic the action in which we want to have and we want to put out.
Yeah, and it's alarming. This research or this poll that he found that he mentioned is like 17% of American parents report they are often distracted by their phone while spending time with their children. With another 52% saying they're sometimes distracted. So 17 are saying that they're often, while 52 say they're sometimes distracted.
Yeah.
When they're with the kids. So how much of an influence are you having with your children when you're just completely distracted by your phones? Again, kids are mimicking. They're looking, right? So in that same example, right? You mentioned that Amy's doing the hand signals for the sign language signal for more, and the child is going to is going to do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if their kids are mimicking you, and all they see you is hunched over on the phone, what are they going to do?
Yeah,
and be hunched over on the phone because they're mimicking the exact example that you're showing them.
That is. I'm not. I always want to say victim. I am at fault for that. Because coming as an adult, you're coming out of a world where we work in a world that's just literally absorbed with technology. Like my desk, I've got literally 5 computer screens. Mo doesn't, but I have 5 computer screens literally in front of me, not including my cell phone, and so which is probably another thing we should do research on to see if that's healthy for you long term. But you get to the end of the day, and it's hard to slow that brain down.
Right, yeah.
And so next thing you know, you pick up your kid after school, not after school, but after sports, or, you go watch a game and they get in the car, and the first thing you do is, pick up the phone, and you're not even looking for anything. You're just, I find myself doing the same thing. Like I'm literally pulling it up, checking an email. Why? I wasn't expecting an email to be checked.
Right.
Just,
it's a routine.
And you're missing it, You're missing those moments where you should be teaching your kid, hey, let's be intentional about a conversation here.
Yeah.
Let's not just talk about your day. Let me listen to hear about your day, and let me show you that I'm interested, Us adults, as far as the in tune side of it, we love to be a part of that. We love to be, I think about like a Georgia football game, right?
Yeah.
How fun is it to be a part of a group cheering together? How fun is it? That's why we get together to support things. How fun is it to go to church and to worship together in unity, right? To be in tune with one another. We feel strengthened. We feel motivated. We feel excited. We feel intentional. We're ready. We're prepared. We're equipped. Yet we give our kids, hey, go take this phone. Don't be what asynchronous or non-synchronous. You're not in tune. Do it on your own type of thing.
Yeah,
it's not good.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're so right. I mean, it is a hard pill to swallow when you think about it. But this is what. Again, it's not too late, right?
Yeah.
And we already discussed social learning a little bit, but I do want to talk really quick. So I don't know if you read this article, if you read the quote from Sean Parker, one of the leaders of Facebook, but he said. Let me just read this whole part right here. Platform designers in Silicon Valley directly targeted this psychological system where they quantified and displayed the success of every post, like, shares, retweets, comments, and every user, which followers are literally called followers. Sean Parker, one of the leaders of Facebook, admitted in a 2017 interview that the goal of Facebook and Instagram was to create a social validation feedback loop. Exactly the kind of thing a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. So I read that and I was like, did he really say that? So I found the video on YouTube. And he did say that. And on top of that, he said he's talking about social media. It literally changes your relationship with society and each other. It probably interferes with productivity in weird ways. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brain. And he talks about they really designed Facebook to give you these little drips of dopamine, right? These likes, these comments. And so as you post a picture, as you post whatever it is, you get these notifications, these likes, and it triggers you to post more. And they wanted you to basically be on their platform all the time, all of the time, and it's absolutely insane. And he talked about how he felt, when he looks back at it, like he couldn't believe he was saying things like that. Like that was their mindset of building this platform where you just get this constant feedback and these little drips of dopamine to continue. They wanted you to be on their sites forever.
Is ultimately the definition of addiction. Like addiction
it's chasing that first high.
Is chasing what ultimately is a filling. You know, you think about like smoking cigarettes, right? It's because it's not the inhalation and what the smoke does to your lungs that get you going. You know what I mean? It's a filling. The filling in the part of the brain, whatever the part of the brain is that controls that, is that dopamine drip. And it's that which we go back to whatever created that. Cigarettes, chewing tobacco, alcohol, drugs, whatever, social media. And yeah, for them to have figured that out, that the children, not to mention adults, but that at such a vulnerable age, that we could create ultimately an addiction. And we talked about that in the very first episode of this, like the formation of the brain. If you look at, once again, the author that wrote that book, Digital Cocaine, he puts out images of a brain, one that has been addicted to cocaine and one that has been overly consumed with time invested into social media. The impact on the brain is not that much different. It's almost identical.
Wow.
And just because of what you're talking, it's creating the same result or the same mechanism, if you will, within the brain. And over time, your natural body builds a defense to that. So you do it more and more. Same thing with drugs. Same thing with the view of social media. You can't let it go. You do it more, creating more of that response. And it's just, it's a huge problem.
Wow.
Huge problem. Lastly, I know we went way too far. The last thing I want to say is about peer pressure. And I didn't really think about this until he threw it out there. But when you and I were growing up, going through like middle school, high school, like peer pressure was me looking at you physically and saying, Mo, I bet you won't do that. Come on, man. I bet you can't do that.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna do that. You ain't gonna jump off that roof into that pool. You ain't gonna come on, man.
You ain't gonna do it.
You ain't gonna take that drink. You're a chicken.
Yeah.
Let's go, bro. Come on. Now, peer pressure is literally happening in the absence of people. Like these kids they have peer pressure and nobody's around. You don't even, as a parent, do you even know? Do you even know if your kid is facing peer pressure while they're in their bedroom, laying down, trying to go to sleep? Knowing that they're mentally dealing with that?
Yeah. Yeah, and without and you're right. I mean, it's that silent peer pressure. There's no one in their room in that example. There's no video of someone saying that. It's literally it's like this need or this want of acceptance that is visible but invisible, that's loud but silent at the same time. Yeah. And if they're handling this on their own, of course it would lead to depression. Of course it would lead to isolation. Of course it would lead to anxiety.
And they are left to handle it on their own. Because
of course, if we're distracted 57% of the time, or 57% of parents are distracted.
Yeah. Yeah. What are we doing?
Well, of course they'll be challenged with these issues and having to deal with it on their own.
Yeah.
Or go online and try to deal with it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or being influenced in ways of how to handle it.
Right.
Because they know. So what do? They go to the source that's fed them and they go search. How do I handle this? They get more influenced. The truth is, there is a great call today, tomorrow, in our future, as guardians, as parents, as leaders, as business leaders, as teachers, educators, school systems, etc., coaches. There is a great responsibility for us to be intentional and to be focused and to be purposed to raise, and I think that's the word, raise the next generation. We got to do it. and we got to be responsible to make sure we get it done. So that said,
man. That was good. Good. Can't wait for next week.
I can't either because I'm gonna be in South Dakota. All right, guys. See you next week. Thanks for joining us.